A haunting guitar melody broke the thick silence that blanketed the house in the quiet suburbs of Los Angeles. Jake froze mid-step on the staircase, his ears drawn to the strange and unfamiliar tune. It wasn't the kind of music he usually heard, nothing cheerful or steady. Instead, it was heavy, fragmented, like a muffled cry hidden within every note. His eyes instinctively darted upstairs toward the room where the music came from. Emily. Just the name alone stirred something restless inside Jake. She had moved in yesterday, bringing with her an entirely different energy that disrupted the once predictable rhythm of this household. He couldn't shake the memory of her arrival, the way she stepped out of that sleek, expensive car with an air of cool detachment. Her gaze had been sharp and unapologetic, making Jake feel invisible in his own home. She had glanced at him only once, a fleeting, almost dismissive look, before walking off as though he wasn't worth a second thought. But now, the music she played seemed to pull him into another world. Jake began climbing the stairs cautiously, his footsteps deliberately light, as though afraid the sound would vanish if he moved too quickly. The closer he got to Emily's room, the louder the melody grew, swelling with raw emotion. Just as he reached her door, the music abruptly stopped. In that moment, the house felt frozen, like it was holding its breath. Her voice cut through the stillness, smooth and laced with sarcasm. Jake flinched. The door swung open, and there she was, Emily, standing in the doorway. Her piercing blue eyes glowed under the soft light of her bedroom. Her brown hair fell casually over her shoulders, and she wore an oversized band t-shirt that Jake didn't recognize, the kind that seemed to amplify her effortless, untamed style. But it was her gaze that truly unsettled him. Cold, sharp, and cutting, as though it could slice right through him. "I wasn't eavesdropping," Jake blurted, feeling heat rise to his face. "It's just your guitar. It sounds nice." Emily raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a smirk that held no warmth. "Nice? That's not exactly high praise for my music. But thanks." She tilted her head slightly, studying him like he was a puzzle she wasn't particularly interested in solving. "Jake, right? The quiet guy who lives here." Jake pressed his lips together, feeling the sting of her words, but choosing not to react. He wasn't great at comebacks, especially not with someone like Emily, who radiated confidence in a way that made others shrink. "Yeah, I'm Jake," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Emily crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Interesting. I didn't peg you as someone who'd care about music. You seem pretty closed off." Her words felt like a needle piercing his pride, but Jake managed to keep his composure. "I'm just curious. Your music feels emotional." For a brief moment, something softened in Emily's eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "Emotional, huh? Maybe. But emotions aren't something I like to share with just anyone." With that, she turned her back to him, stepping back into her room and shutting the door. Before Jake could say anything else, moments later, the sound of her guitar filled the air again. Only this time, the melody was more intense, stormy, almost like a tempest had been unleashed. Jake stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind buzzing with questions. Why did she seem so burdened? How could someone who exuded so much strength create music that felt so broken? He eventually retreated to his room, but the sound of Emily's guitar lingered in his mind long after he closed the door. It was like a whisper in the dark, a piece of a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. And though he wouldn't admit it, Emily had awakened something in him, something he wasn't ready to name. Was it curiosity, or perhaps something deeper? Something closer to longing? What Jake didn't know was that Emily's guitar wasn't just music. It was a prelude, a quiet warning of the complex and dangerous emotions that were about to unravel, pulling both of them into a storm neither of them could escape. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. Emily's guitar still echoed in his mind, as if every note had etched itself into his memory. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his chest heavy with an inexplicable restlessness. There was something about Emily that Jake couldn't quite grasp. Not just the way she walked into the house with defiant confidence, but the way her music resonated. It wasn't just heavy, it was haunting. It carried a cry for help, masked beneath each lingering chord. The next morning, Jake came down to the kitchen earlier than usual. To his surprise, Emily was already there, seated at the table with a coffee cup in front of her. She didn't say anything, just tapped her fingers lightly on the table to an imaginary rhythm, her gaze fixed out the window. For the first time, Jake noticed something different about her. Gone was her usual air of indifference. In the soft morning light, her face betrayed a quiet sadness that he couldn't quite place. "Morning," Jake greeted, his voice breaking the silence. Emily turned to look at him, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. "Morning," she replied curtly, her voice hoarse, as if it carried the weight of a sleepless night. Jake slid into the seat across from her, gripping his coffee cup as if to anchor himself. The silence between them wasn't hostile, but it was thick with unspoken thoughts. Finally, he broke it, his tone gentle but tinged with curiosity. "Your guitar last night. It was good." Emily let out a laugh, but it wasn't filled with joy. "Good? I don't think you really get it." Jake frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Emily took a sip of her coffee, her gaze briefly meeting his before drifting somewhere far away. "My music, it's not for fun. It's how I escape. But no matter how much I play, reality's always there, waiting for me." Jake didn't know how to respond. He felt the weight of her words, the raw honesty behind them. There was something simmering beneath her surface, something trapped, something she couldn't free herself from. But before he could ask more, Emily set her coffee down and leaned back in her chair. "Do you ever feel like you don't belong anywhere?" she asked, her voice low yet sharp, like a blade cutting through his thoughts. Jake froze. The question struck at the deepest part of him, pulling at things he'd never shared with anyone. "Yeah," he admitted quietly. "All the time." Emily smirked, but it wasn't mocking. It was tired, as though she was resigned to a truth they both understood. "Well, at least we have that in common." She stood up, taking her empty coffee cup to the sink. Jake watched her move, her confidence masking a loneliness he could feel but not fully comprehend. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure if he should say something, but he couldn't stop himself. "Why do you feel that way?" he asked. Emily froze mid-motion, her hand clutching the cup. She didn't turn to face him, but her voice cut through the air, cold and bitter. "Because this place, this house, this life, it's all an arrangement. My mom didn't marry your dad for love. She married him because she needed stability, someone who could carry the weight she couldn't. And me? I'm just the baggage she brought along." Jake felt his throat tighten. He hadn't expected her to be so blunt, to strip away the polite facade of their blended family with such brutal honesty. Her words shattered the carefully constructed image of harmony his father had tried so hard to create. Emily turned back to him, and for the first time, her sharp gaze softened into something hollow, something vulnerable. "Do you ever feel like you're just a piece in someone else's game?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Jake didn't answer. He didn't need to. Emily nodded slightly, as if she already understood, and then she walked out of the kitchen, leaving Jake alone with a storm of emotions raging inside him. After she left, Jake stared out the window, where the morning sunlight spilled over the backyard. In his chest, a question lingered. Who was Emily, really? And why did he feel such an irresistible pull to understand her? As if discovering her truth was something he couldn't avoid. Jake didn't realize it then, but this was only the beginning of a connection that neither of them could have foreseen.